So you may recall from the last video that I talked about remaking this piece here out of some spring steel and just dremeling it out. And this was a piece of that spring steel I was talking about. But I decided I was going to go back and cut some pieces out on the pantograph out of the 410 and then pre-bend them and then heat treat them. And so here are a couple pieces that I cut out. Now you can tell on this one I kind of spotted where I was going to drill the hole. I didn't go all the way through with it because it's not the diameter I needed anyway. But I spotted it. On this one I forgot to spot it, but that's no big deal. I'm just going to center punch it, and I'm going to do that off camera. I don't want to center punch it on my granite block here. I've got a piece of aluminum that I can center punch it on. But what we're going to do is we're going to bend this to form and try to make it match our original piece. And I looked for some different objects around the shop. I actually made another one of these that I tested with, and this was the best object that I found. It's an old bean can. I'd used it. I had it for, I want to make sure I bend this the right direction. It's going to bend this way. I had this for doing some shooting some pellet guns out in the yard. But anyway, so I'm just going to put this on here and just bend it. Just kind of bend it along the path of the can there. And this can kind of gives way. I really should have done it on this end with the back end on it, so it's a little more firm. And then this gives us a little bit of a bend. That might be a little bit too much right in the middle, but let's check this against our original. If we can get in focus here. Let's see, let me grab something we can actually put this on so we can compare them. So I can get them even. That's pretty close. That's close enough. I'm not gonna adjust that. That'll leave a little extra, and I can take some off the bottom if it's too thick. So what I'll do is I will heat treat this, and then I'm going to wait, because this 410, this is, what is this? This is the 24 thousandths. Because it's so thin, I'm going to wait and drill my hole after I heat treat, and I'll be able to do that with a carbide drill. It should be no problem. But I'll heat treat it just like this. Now the other spring that I wasn't real happy with was the leaf spring. And the leaf spring came out and works okay, but the one that I made is just a little bit thinner than the original. So this is the original right here, and this is the one that I made. And you know, if you recall from the last video, we could bend it and it would return to the exact position it needed to, but with it being thinner than the original, I'm just a little bit concerned. And one other thing also is I'm gonna tighten up my blade on this. I'm not going to have my blade as loose, so that means I'm going to need a little bit stronger spring to actuate it. So I wasn't real happy with this one. Now if you recall, the way I made this is on the pantograph with a pantograph template, and I basically just cut it out just little by little in this shape. Now in making another one, I made another pantograph template, and I made it a little bit thicker. And I went to cut it out, and I was cutting this out of CPM 154. That's what this is. It works great for springs. But I had the wrong stylus in, and the new one came out even thinner than this one. So I was like, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to come up with some other way. And so I got to thinking about the way that David Parker was telling me about it. And I decided what I was going to do is just cut me out some more strips. So I cut these out just like I did those test strips in an earlier video. But this is out of 32 thousandths stainless, 410. Now I don't know how well this 410 is going to work, but I'm more interested in this method of forming these strips than I am actually how these springs turn out at this point. If they turn out good, then that's great. We'll just see how they do. But if my method for bending these things works well, then you know, I'll get another spring, another type of steel that makes good springs. I'll just have to find it in thin sheets like this. But anyway, so I cut these out to test with. Now what I'm going to do, and what David was talking about, was he said he had I guess 2 pieces of metal that kind of like a form where you could put the spring in there and squeeze it between the vise, and when you did, it would take like a straight strip like this and form it to the correct shape. So I thought, well, I could probably design and print something like that, and this is what I came up with. And so this is my little jig, and you can see here it's just got these pins in for sliders to keep it aligned, and you can see the shape. Now this has shelves like right here, and that's so that it can sit down in my vise like that without falling through. And then I also have on this piece this extension right here, and what that's for is get this line back up. That's so I can put the spring material in. It's kind of awkward trying to do this like this. And basically it holds it without falling through. And then I can come in here and squeeze that in the vise and form my spring. So let's go over to the vise and see how well this works. I have my fixture in the vise, and I'm going to tighten it, get it right on that spring, get a little tension on there. So I got everything in here and ready to go. And so I'm just going to crank it down and we'll see what happens. Now one thing I needed to do was make sure that my spring was long enough to stay outside of my fixture even after it bends, because when it bends it's going to be shorter, I guess, just straight across. So I wanted to make sure it was long enough that that wasn't going to interfere with it. So we're just going to crank it down here good. I don't have this vise fixtured. All right, let's see what we have. That's not too bad. Now, if you have any concern about this because it's plastic, I ended up making this using a triangle 50% infill and 6 wall layers. So this thing is plenty strong, especially for bending something like this. Let me go grab the original. We'll compare them and see how their form is. All right, here's the original. So let me just stack them. So my original has a little bit more bend to it. And that's to be expected because I designed this thing to match the original, and there's still a little bit of springiness to this, so to speak, but that's no problem. I'm just going to loop it under here and put that center on there, and just going to raise it just a little. Just put a little bit of bend in there like that. We'll test it again. So you put my original on top. Yeah, I think that's, getting the camera. I think that's going to get it right there. So you can tell that this one is a good bit thicker. I say a good bit, it's thicker. But that's it. So there's my 2 springs. I guess I need to, one other thing I need to do is I need to trim my longer spring down to match my other spring in length. So let's go back over to the bench. For this, I'm just going to line up the centers and get my little side cutters here. And I'm going to cut this off with my garbage can. So there's one side. Well, and there's my other side. And I'll hit these ends on my little belt sander just to kind of clean them up a little bit. And after that, I'm going to take these 2 parts, not that one, that's the flat one. I'll go ahead and do both of them because I'm going to need 2 of these anyway. But I'm going to take these 2 parts and package them up, heat treat them, spring temper them, and then we'll pick back up when I have these out of the oven. We'll see how they turned out. Here's my packet after it's been heat treated and tempered. And let's see what we have. Now, I did this just like I did the last one, where I left it in the packet for tempering, just so I didn't have to fool with a bunch of individual parts. Getting them in and out, it just made it convenient. All right. My 2 button return springs. There's my leaf spring. This one I'm really interested in, seeing how it works. Whether it's going to come back to where it is now or if it's going to snap. So we'll see. These came out looking nice, have a nice color to them. So let me get these over in the vise, and we'll do a little spring test on them and see how they come out. Here are the button return springs on there, with the new one on the outside and the older one on the inside. And so we'll just do a little spring test. Seem to both be working well. And yeah, I think that's going to work. So let me get these out and we'll get the leaf springs in there. All right, we'll see how these leaf springs do. So these things are raised up pretty high, and you know they're not going to straighten totally out in the knife just because of the way they are, so I'm not going to go all the way down with this, but we'll just see what happens. Let me go all the way down just to see if that's working really well. Well, I'm trying to figure out if this one may have formed a little bit. It may not have returned to where it was when I did go all the way down with it, which means I should be able to reform this a little bit. It's probably not going to make the best spring, it being 410, but I did want to test the concept of using the little jig and seeing how this is going to work. So we're going to move forward in the project with this. If we get on down the road and it's not strong enough to throw the blade, then I'll go back and make another spring. But I think we'll just continue with this 410 spring and see what happens. All right, I want to say one other thing about this spring that I forgot to mention. So with these springs, when I tempered them at 25 degrees higher than I tempered the button return springs originally. So if you recall, I did a little card of button return springs. They were all flat. I hardened them, I tempered them, and then my plan was to bend them after the fact, and that didn't work. They snapped off. So I thought, okay, with these I'm going to pre-bend, and then I'm going to harden, and I'm going to increase the temperature of the tempering cycle so that they'll come out a little bit softer. And I think increasing the temperature is what caused the leaf spring, after I went all the way down, not to return to the place that it was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these other 2 strips and I'm going to form them to shape using the little jig. Then I'm going to harden them, and then I'm going to temper them, but I'm going to temper them back at the original tempering temperature that I was using. And I believe after that, then they'll hold their shape. And I don't have to worry about them snapping, I don't think, because I'm not trying to form them after the fact. Plus also these are longer and thinner in their width, not in their thickness, but in their width than the button return spring. So I don't think there's a risk of snapping in that scenario. Now, one thing I want to also add in this video is this is the 10th video in the series, and it's the 4th one dealing with springs. And now that I think that I've figured out how to make all of the small parts that I was most concerned about how to make, I'm probably going to take a break for a little bit. I've got some other projects. I need to get back to finishing up a few knives and make another batch of head spinners and some different things like that. So I'm going to put a break in this project, but I will pick it back up and we'll move forward with the knife with some of the larger components in the near future. So I appreciate you watching the video, and I appreciate all the feedback that I've gotten, and we'll pick this up not too long from now.